Welcome, deep divers. Today, we're plunging into a really powerful exploration of money. We're not just looking at it as, currency, but as this profound instrument of power and maybe even oppression. Our guide for this journey is Frederick Howe and his book, The Use of Money, published, gosh, all the way back in 1910. Our mission today is basically to uncover how surprisingly relevant insights, how money shapes, well, everything. Our economic systems, political institutions, our daily lives, even now, over a century later. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, Frederick Howe, he was quite a figure in his time, a lawyer, an economist, and a pretty significant progressive reformer. And his central message in the use of money is really urgent. It challenges this fundamental idea that money is just neutral,
Yeah.
a medium of exchange. Howe argues it's anything but. He says it's one of the most effective tools for power ever devised. So we're here to understand the structure, the purpose, and the impact he identified.
Howe kicks off making this really bold claim. He says money is an institution more potent than any single individual or political party. And when you read that, you kind of stop and think, okay, how can something so abstract, so intangible, wield so much control? It's not a person, it's not a government body.
Yeah.
How does it command that authority?
Right, and that's the crux of it. Howe explains that money governs society's structure, but silently, invisibly.
Yeah.
Doesn't need your loyalty, doesn't ask for consent. It just subtly determines who gets ahead and who falls behind, who gets access to privilege, opportunity, wealth,
Yeah.
and who's shut out. He really hammers home this core point. Money isn't just convenient. It is fundamentally a system of power, shapes everything.
Okay, so if money is this invisible force, what does its impact actually look like on the ground? Howe takes us straight into the America of 1910, and he highlights the stark contrast he saw. You have immense, almost unimaginable wealth right next to, well, grinding poverty. And he asks this really uncomfortable question: why? Why do the people doing the hardest, most essential work, farmers, factory workers, laborers, why do they often face economic ruin, while, others enjoy massive riches with what seems like very little productive labor? Here's where it gets really interesting.
Well, Howe's answer to that is pretty direct. The inequality he saw, it stems directly from how money and, this is crucial, credit are structured and handed out. It's less about individual effort, he argues, and more about the rules of the financial game itself.
So the original idea, the theory, was that money was just this neutral tool for exchange, right? To make trade easier.
Exactly. That's the starting point. But Howe's critical insight is that over time, money got transformed. It stopped being just a tool. It actually became a commodity itself, something that could be made scarce and then critically controlled. And this transformation, he asserts, basically turned money into a weapon. That's his term. And who gained control? Banks, financiers, certain powerful corporations. They became, in his words, the rulers of this new economic world.
A weapon. So if money became a weapon, who exactly was wielding it, according to Howe? He seems to turn his focus directly onto what he saw as the epicenter of this new power, the concentrated strength of banking institutions.
Yeah, he argued that banks, under the guise of providing liquidity and credit, which sounds helpful, they actually captured the real levers of economic life. That's how he put it. They dictated terms by controlling who gets credit, the interest rates, and, crucially, the ever-present threat of foreclosure. And Howe's conclusion is pretty startling. Success, he found, wasn't really determined by hard work or talent or even being a good person. It came down to the ability to command credit.
Wow.
And he points out this ability was not distributed justly and was often withheld from those who need it most.
It sounds incredibly modern, that conversation around access to capital.
It really does.
And he backs this up with specific examples, right? He talks about the American farmer. Paints a pretty grim picture.
Oh, definitely. He describes what he calls the farmer's cruel cycle. Farmers borrow money to plant their crops, to harvest, only to find that any profit they make gets eaten up by sky-high interest rates in this spiraling debt, which, sadly, often led to foreclosure. And the land, it didn't go to another farmer. It went to the financier, the lender. Howe saw this as literally hollowing out America's agricultural backbone, causing widespread despair in rural areas.
And it wasn't just the countryside, was it? He also looked at the cities, the growing urban centers. What was the situation for city dwellers?
He connected the dots there, too. The pervasive urban misery,
Hmm.
the overcrowded tenements, the slums, the really high rents, inflated food prices, stagnant low wages. He linked all that directly back to money being concentrated in too few hands. And he pushed back against the idea that the poor were poor because they were lazy or somehow morally flawed. No, he said, it's because the economic game is rigged against them.
Hmm.
He pointed to things like real estate speculators driving up housing costs, trapping people in these cycles of debt, and just deprivation.
Okay, now here's a concept that really, I think, challenges a core belief for many. How Call comes right out and says it. We do not live under a free market. He calls it a myth. What did he actually mean by that? How is it a myth in his view?
Well, his point was that the supposed freedom is largely an illusion. For a market to be truly free, Howe argued, you'd need several things. Things like equal access to money and credit for everyone, genuinely equal bargaining power, and, importantly, the complete absence of monopolies. But he looked around in 1910 and said, none of these conditions exist, not even close. Instead, the economy was dominated by huge trusts, cartels, and these things called interlocking directorates.
Interlocking directorates.
Yeah, where the same powerful people sit on the boards of multiple, supposedly separate companies. It creates this silent network of control. So what's fascinating here is his conclusion. True freedom, in the economic sense, exists only for the wealthy.
That's a strong statement.
Very. And again, it echoes concerns we still hear today about, corporate concentration and power.
And he took it even further, didn't he? It wasn't just that wealth was concentrated, but that wealth perpetuates itself, not necessarily through new ideas or hard work, but through this kind of monopolized access to opportunities, especially to capital.
Exactly. And the danger Howe identifies there is profound. He says when opportunity itself is monopolized, the whole dream of democracy becomes a lie. He saw it stifling education, crushing social mobility, even undermining political participation. Because if you're ambitious, if you're talented, but you lack the financial means, you're often forced into submission. You just can't get ahead. And Howe underscored this wasn't just unfair, it was deeply dangerous to the future of the Republic. A society that stifles ambition like that can't truly thrive.
So, okay, he outlines all these huge systemic problems, financial power, inequality, monopolies. Did he offer any solutions? What reforms did Howe champion? After diagnosing all this, what does this all mean for moving forward?
Well, Howe was definitely a reformer. He championed a series of pretty bold, progressive ideas for his time. Things like public banking, the idea of financial institutions serving the community, not just private profit. He also pushed for democratic control over monetary issuance, meaning the public, through its government, should decide how money is created and circulated, not private banks. And generally, government policies aimed squarely at breaking the stranglehold of these financial elites. But he was also realistic. He warned that the people benefiting from the existing system would resist fiercely. Funding propaganda, buying politicians, sowing confusion to protect their interests. Sounds familiar, right?
Yeah, depressingly so.
But despite that, he insisted that change was both necessary and possible. He had hope.
And finally, he kind of elevates the whole argument, doesn't he? He brings in this moral dimension. It's not just about economics for him.
Absolutely. He argues that a society allowing this kind of exploitation through finance isn't just inefficient or unfair. It is, at its core, corrupt. He felt it fostered the worst in people, selfishness, greed, cruelty, that it undermined civic virtue, basic decency, that it made a mockery of justice. So his final call, it's really powerful, to reclaim democracy, to restore dignity, to actually renew freedom. We must transform our relationship with money. We have to start treating it, he says, not as a weapon, but as a tool for the common good.
It really is remarkable, isn't it? How much of Frederick Howe's The Use of Money, written way back in 1910, speaks so directly to our world today. His insights into financial power, inequality, the nature of economic justice, they just feel incredibly modern, astonishingly so.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we live in an age of rising inequality, globalized markets, widespread economic insecurity. His call for a fair and democratic economy, it just seems to ring louder than ever, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe this raises an important question for you, the listener. In what specific ways do you see Howe's observations about this invisible empire of money still shaping individual lives, individual destinies, and national policies in your own experience today? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. And to dive even deeper into topics like these, we do recommend clicking on the link in the description to subscribe to Audible. You can get your first month free and enjoy a huge variety of audiobooks and podcasts. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.